Good afternoon, everybody. Fergus Dolan here from NALA. You're very welcome to our numeracy webinar this afternoon on value for money, comparing offers from 3 mobile phone companies. It's part of our Maths Week program of webinars. So we're delighted to have Sheelagh Clowry facilitating today. Sheelagh is an experienced numeracy tutor, and she'll be taking you through some complicated stuff from 3 different mobile phone companies. So Sheelagh is very keen for you to unmute at times and ask questions or give comments. So stay on your toes and unmute if you have any comment or question. Okay, over to you, Sheelagh, and all the best.
Hello, everybody. You're very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join me in this webinar today. You can see that the title of it is Value for Money, Choosing a Mobile Phone Bill Pay Contract. Now, I chose this context because every adult and every teen has to, at some point, make choices between mobile phone companies. And it can be quite complicated to sift through the information. So also for numeracy, we know from research that context is one of the essential elements of numeracy. Now, the source of this task is from the PhD thesis of Dr. Cathy O'Sullivan, who you'll be meeting tomorrow, investigating pre-service teachers' knowledge of numeracy and teaching numeracy for disciplinary learning. The PhD thesis includes 6 tasks, and this is the 6th one. They're all excellent tasks. And I chose this one, as I said to you before, because I think it's relevant to every adult. And I learned quite a bit when going through it myself. Now, we'll just refer very briefly here to our National Strategy, Literacy and Numeracy for Learning in Life. In that, numeracy is defined as encompassing the ability to use mathematical understanding and skills to solve problems and to meet the demands of day-to-day living in complex social settings. So even though there might seem to be quite a bit of information in this task, it is actually one that they will come across quite often. So here's the task. David wants to buy a new iPhone 7, 32 gigabytes. Below is a list of phone companies who have deals on the iPhone 7, 32 gigabytes. Now, you may say at this point here, well, the iPhone model has moved along a bit. Yes, it has, but the principles in this task are still relevant to the offers that we're getting today, currently. So perhaps now at this stage with your students, if you present them with this task, you might need to discuss with them what's meant by bill pay as opposed to pay as you go. Or you might need to have a discussion with them about all the different types of charges in a bill pay plan. So I'll just give you just 10 seconds there to think about what are all the different types of charges in a bill pay plan. Okay, so I suppose when we give students any task, the idea here is just to check their prior knowledge, just to get them into the zone of the task and thinking about it. So here is the task. David wants to buy a new iPhone. Below is a list of phone companies who have deals on the iPhone 7, 32 gigabyte. So in the table, we have 3 phone companies, Meteor, Vodafone, and 3. Now, I realize Meteor is now Air, but the principles are the same. The price of each phone is given. So you can see the 3 different prices there. The monthly cost is given. And the data then that's included in the package, 10 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes, 3 gigabytes. Text messages are unlimited for the 3 companies. The minutes given by the 3 companies, 400, 100, and 350. The contract length is given. And then if we don't stay within those limits of data and minutes, there are add-ons, out of allowance charges, and these are given per month. Now you can see the price there for extra minutes for each of them, and the price for extra data for each of the companies. Now, at this point here, what do students need to know about their own usage before making a choice of phone company? So maybe if you would unmute there at this stage, please, and somebody might share with us.
Anyone would like to suggest what students need to know about their own usage before choosing a phone company?
Well, this is Tony Sweeney here.
Hi, Tony.
Sheelagh, they would want to know whether they were going on for long sessions, like for instance, if they were downloading like a football match or something, you know.
Right,
I mean, of course, the iPhone is not. You can't do that on the iPhone, can you? You can on the smartphone, you can. But if you're doing big items, you'd want to have a lot more data.
Exactly.
You know, so there's the smaller Meteor is the one that I would go for in that instance.
Okay, and the times as well. So
yes.
That's great, Tony. Thank you. So they need what's good for one person is not necessarily good for another. So you need to have a talk about what your own personal usage is going to be. Now, because we're not doing this for everybody in the class, but that could be something you could do in the future where students would research and do this for their own personal benefit. We have David here, usually uses 500 minutes per month and 15 gigabytes of data. So we're going to go with that, and that they would, how would they know this? Well, they'd know from their previous bills, or they'd know if they got warnings on their phone if they were going over the data usage. So now we're asking the question, which plan would you recommend David to choose? And please give mathematical reasoning for your answer. Now, some of you might like to take a photo of the screen at this stage if you want to keep it for future reference as we go along, although I will try and keep the relevant information on each screen. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds there if you'd like to take a photo of the task. Okay, and not to worry, what's on the PowerPoint will all be shared with you, and I also have a Word file going with it as well. So do you think this is going to be a bit challenging for your students? Think about your own students there as we go through it. And in case anybody is thinking about the data there, or any of your students, I'm just putting up here the conversion factor for a moment, that 1 gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. And we will deal with converting the units as we go along, because that might be a stumbling block for students when they look at it. Megabytes, gigabytes, what's going on here? So a lot of information. As a generic problem-solving strategy, we should always sort of review what's the information we've been given. So you constantly go back and what's the information that you have been given? What is varying? What is staying the same? So the monthly costs are varying, the data per company is varying, the number of minutes per company is varying. So these are all questions we need to ask for any task. Now I'm going to ask you, and I know Tony has come in there already, so you have preempted my question, Tony, thank you. With no calculation at all, which deal seems to be best for David? And pretend you didn't hear Tony, okay? So I'm thinking of your students, and maybe, so I'll just give you half a minute there, write it down, and then at the end, just see why you chose that. What do you think your students will choose as well? So it's very important with any task to predict before you do the calculations, because often students get numbers at the end and you have to say, are your numbers making sense? You know, why is it that I predicted something and then it didn't turn out that way? Or maybe I did my calculations wrong, or maybe some of my reasoning wasn't correct. Now, here we are as the tutors, and we have to break this down into manageable parts. So again, I'm going to ask you to unmute, please. And could somebody say, as a first step, how could you maybe simplify this task for your students?
There's Tony here.
Thanks, Tony.
I would group some of the data together. Like, for instance, the data amount maybe and the minutes, or the data amount and the cost. You know, so there might be two factors that might be important.
Right. So definitely not dealing with everything all at the same time. I told you, because, and isn't that's what's overwhelmed students. They're trying to do everything at the same time. So you're breaking it down. We're going to do the minutes. I think if I understand you correctly, we're going to do the data. Is that right, Tony?
Yes.
Separate. Yeah, that's great. And thank you very much. And I've even gone back a bit further. Sorry. So let's say you were really, really disciplined and you decided, okay, I'm just going to stay with the bundle. What about that, Tony? Or anybody else there? So if we said we're, for the moment, we're going to take whatever they give us, would that be a possibility? So let's see how it goes.
It mightn't solve your problem. It might be no good to you. So.
Right. So because obviously you have certain needs and there's no point in ignoring them.
Yeah.
Okay. So bear with me for a minute. And let's say how much would each contract cost if there were no out of allowance charges, if I just took what were given me for the moment? So I'm going to, you know, when you get a lot of information at once, that it can be very useful just to show the necessary information. So I'm going to block out what I don't need at the moment. And now, what does this cost me? And stating the steps in words first. So I'm going to buy the phone and I'm going to have €45 per month. And what sometimes students can't forget is that that's for 24 months. So the difference between 40 and 45, let's say here, is only €5. But when you multiply that over 24 months, it's €120. So they might be just thinking monthly. So I'm definitely coming to what you were suggesting, Tony, and is that okay? And I'm just going to pretend we're very disciplined at the moment. Okay.
Okay.
Now, there's another issue here, and I know yesterday a lot of you attended a seminar about rounding and estimating. So this task, of course, includes so many opportunities for rounding and estimating. I mean, nobody goes around €499. We would all say, oh, that's €500. That's approximately €250. The second phone, €350 for the 3 phone. So here's an opportunity again to round and estimate and work out an approximate cost. You may even block out the cost of the phone at this point and just work out what's monthly cost going to be. So we've broken it down even further. So that's up to you. It depends on your students. So I think though it's really important, as opposed to just saying 45 by 24 plus 499, it's the monthly cost by the number of months plus the price of the phone. Have everything in words. Some of you will have had the experience, I know I have had the experience, when students start to do calculations, and the calculations may be correct, they're all over the page, and when they're finished, they're not quite sure which answer belongs to which. So I think it's very important that they learn how to lay out their work properly. I'm suggesting a table here. It doesn't have to be a table, but as long as everything is labeled, that's the key message. So I have a table here where they can fill in the phone cost, the cost for each month, and then work out the final cost. So any comments on that? If anybody wants to unmute at this point?
Anyone unmute if you have any comment on how your student might find this exercise? Is it doable with them, or could you maybe adjust the exercise to make it more doable as well?
Yeah, Imelda here.
Hi, Imelda.
Mine have switched off ages ago. I think at this point there's just too much in this for my group. I hope I'm not doing them a disservice by saying that. But yes, I find myself looking at it thinking, how could I use this, but in a much, much, much simpler way?
So do you think you could start at this stage?
No, I think even that table, at the very first table, they would go, here, stop.
Is there anything in it for them, Imelda? It's like,
I think the second table that you've got here with the blank spaces, even if I presented that, where I've got the phone cost and have already done the calculation where the monthly cost is multiplied by the 24 and got rid of the other stuff, you know, I might try and work with that perhaps rather than everything that was on the table initially.
so you could break down this table into 3 tables, maybe.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is really a question, I think, of breaking it down. I totally agree with you. And even though I have broken it down to a certain extent, you're saying break it down even further.
For me, I definitely would have to. Yes.
Yeah. Oh no, that is extremely reasonable in the situation. I totally agree with you. But I'm hoping that maybe the context of it might be useful.
Yes, absolutely. I think I might also face the comment at the very beginning, I can't afford bill pay. It would always be pay as you go. You know, that might be said right at the start.
Yes, that's true. And maybe even then working out, because sometimes if they're on pay as you go, maybe they go over the minutes or they go over the data limit and they might have to pay extra, maybe. You know, it might cost them a bit more, but yeah.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh no,
Sorry.
I mean, the entirety of this task might be too much. I definitely can understand that, but hopefully some of the context will be applicable, even
Yes.
for the rounding.
Yeah, I just say a word or two. I think when there's a lot of data in a table and student and teacher have to look at it, and there's a lot of reasoning to be done from the table, that the line of the line of thinking or reasoning, there should be a teacher support, like for instance arrows or some color coding, in order to show the line of reasoning why one thing is better than another.
So yeah, color coding definitely.
Or arrows or something. And to have them in conjunction with the reasoning, with the thinking.
And even I think, Tony, their reading tables is a big issue, isn't it?
It is. That's why
Yeah.
I said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes, you know, if you have a problem with reading a table, maybe if you've created your own table, it might be helpful in that process somewhere.
Yes.
So that was just my thinking there, yeah. And there's a lot in this, I acknowledge that,
Yeah.
totally. So anyway, the figures here are almost incidental. It's more about the reasoning behind it, I think, and what you do to find out which one is most expensive. And then, of course, you have your rounding here again. And as it turns out, no surprise, the one that's cheapest is Vodafone. But there was very little difference in the monthly cost, but there was a big difference in the phone. So having a conversation with the students, if they've got to this stage, why is it that Vodafone is the most expensive? Because sometimes when they've got answers, they won't go back to the reasoning behind, you know, they're just happy with their answer.
Could it be shown by using some kind of bar charts to compare one
That's-
thing with another?
That's definitely a great idea for an add-on to this.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because sometimes even looking at numbers, we're not able to compare them very well. So you have another aspect that you could add in. So the visual aspect there using the bar chart, that's great. Oh no, there are lots of things I know could be added to this. I suppose that's why I like the task so much. I think it has so much and it's very useful as well. So now we're asking, is cheap good value? Well, you're only getting 100 minutes per month if you go with Vodafone. And maybe you could ask the students the question, well, if I have 100 minutes per month, approximately how many minutes per day is that? So, you know, hopefully around 3 minutes per day. Now, I know they may make a lot of their calls in Wi-Fi zones and use WhatsApp and maybe get away that way. But still 3 minutes per day roughly is quite small. So we need 500 minutes. And what is each company offering? So you have to go back again to the information. Now, I put it in a separate table here, the minutes included per month. Imelda, do you think that
Yeah, I can see that you know, that would help, of course.
Yeah, and so then you're asking the question, okay, so what do we need to calculate? And that it's a two-step process, you know, so how many minutes do we need? And then what's it going to cost us? So the minutes to buy. Now, I have a table in a Word file that you can use for this. It matches this table if you think it'd be useful. Of course, there's far more than numeracy going on here. There's a huge amount of literacy going on as well. And then the cost of the extra minutes for 1 month. So there are the minutes to buy. So at this stage, you know, even looking at those figures and saying, well, who's closest to our needs? You know, we've less to buy from Meteor, we've less to buy from 3. We have to go back to the information then, and that information always has to be readily available. So 0.3 euro per minute, and I have to buy 100 minutes. 0.25 euro per minute, I have to buy 400 minutes. So predict which company is going to be the most expensive. So before every calculation, the idea of making a prediction. And I know there's a big difference here between the 3 cost and Meteor and Vodafone, and they're quite close together. So I'm multiplying here by 400 instead of by 100. So before the calculations, I'm suggesting the strategy of always predicting. So then they do their calculation. And now the question is, well, are we finished now? We're talking about a contract. So If you unmute, then what's the last thing that they will have to do? So that's the cost of the extra minutes for 1 month. So what might they forget about? If anybody can come in there, please. We worked out the cost of extra minutes for 1 month. Does that cover the contract?
I think, do you mean to add on the previous?
So we've got
multiply
to-
by 24.
Yeah, so
Fine.
both of those things, yes, add on, but this, remember, is multiplied by 24. Now, I gave this task to a couple of adults just to run it by people, you know, see how it would go. And I have to tell you that this was one of the things that was a lot of people forgot about. The cost for 24 months. And of course, where difference is here, you know, between 30 and 100, it's 70 euro. Okay, it's a significant difference, but when you multiply it by 24, it's a very big difference. You know, you're talking about 1,700 euro there of a difference over 24 months. So thank you very much for that there. So now there's the cost for the 24 months. Now, where are we? Calculate the cost of the contract with the extra minutes added in first. So you'd go back now and state, okay, well, I bought my phone, paid per month, and now the extra minutes. So if we put all that together, and I have a table on the Word file for this as well. And I think maybe Tony's point as well, maybe we should have more colours for Measure, one colour, Vodafone, one colour, 3 another colour, something like that would help, and other things as well. I know Tony has very good ideas there, and all of you will know your own students and what will work for them and the bar chart. So I'm putting in the figures here. You might, for some students, maybe fill in the first row. That might be useful. And then let them fill in the rest. So we have from the previous table, cost, phone cost, and monthly cost. Okay. So when we had no extra minutes or extra data, Vodafone was cheapest. So now, who's cheapest? So we can see there, 3 is cheapest. And then, why is 3 cheapest? So I'm thinking about, what might your students say? Anybody want to unmute and come in there? So we'll go back to, I'll just show you, they need to see the original information. So why did 3 turn out to be cheapest?
The minutes was cheaper.
The minutes was cheaper, and you were also quite close to what you needed, weren't you?
Yeah.
You needed 150, yeah. So I think that is important there, that you stop and say why at the end of each section, so the reasoning keeps going through. The rounding and estimating as well, really important at this stage. So now David has enough minutes, but there are disadvantages to this, because if we look at, he needs 15 gigabytes per month. And this is where I think we're coming to the most difficult part of the task. So we've just stated the steps in words. There's the number of gigabytes included in the plan. He needs 15. So I think they'll probably be able to fill this table quite easily. Okay, I need to buy 5, I need to buy 10, I need to buy 12. So I have to buy the company I have to buy most gigabytes from is 3. Company I have to buy least gigabytes from is 5. What will be the implications of that? Do I know the cost of a gigabyte? Now there's the information. Now, I'd like you to think about this for a minute and then unmute, please, for a couple of minutes and see how you might deal with, at this point, working out the cost of a gigabyte, because there isn't just one way of doing it. And think about your own students, please. So if anybody would like to unmute, please, and just any ideas here at this stage. And I know at this stage, this is definitely going to be the most difficult part for our students.
I
think it's, sorry, Tony.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I'd break it down
Rona,
to the
thank you.
smallest part. Sorry, Rona here. Down to 1 megabyte for
Right.
all the plans before I go any further.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. So the unitary method, and what we used to call years ago, unitary method.
Yeah.
Find out what it costs per 1 gigabyte. Yes, that's definitely a very good strategy. And anybody else?
I was going to bring it up to 1 gigabyte, but it's the same thing, really. To have all three so that you can compare them. It's the very same thing.
It's the same thing. So the fact that you're saying that in words there, it's, you know, and Rona the same, we can't go any further unless we know what the cost is for 1 gigabyte. And the information given there is given in a way that it actually makes it quite difficult for people to compare. And just to be aware of that units are important and converting from one unit to the other. And they may have converted before, maybe between centimeters and meters or something like that. If we hear, you know, megabytes and gigabytes, maybe that's an unfamiliar conversion that they have had up to now. Would you agree, or would they have done something like that? Megabytes to gigabytes or the other way around? Anybody? Is that, I think it's going to be unfamiliar for them. So anyway,
I was
let's.
just going to say mega.
Imelda, yes,
just
thank
the
you.
term mega to giga, they'd be familiar with that. But adding on that it's bytes, then obviously we're in relation to a phone, would be just a little explanation there.
Yes, so there's definitely an aside here, isn't there?
Yeah.
And maybe like you could have a class before, knowing that this is coming up, that you would have had the conversation before you ever come to this task. And then they see the use of it, or some strategy like that. So here we go then. And I have a table again, whatever way you think this is best to do. And please unmute and come in with your comments when I show you the table. So I took the information from the original task and put it into the table, and you'll notice that where the table had 0.02 per 1 megabyte, I reversed it. So I said 1 megabyte costs, 200 megabytes costs, 10 megabytes costs. And you'll see why I have these two in red, because the first one, you know, I know what 1 megabyte costs. So then it's much easier for me to get the cost of 1,000 megabytes. Yeah. Now, 0.02 euro. Again, you know, with money, would they be more familiar if you said 2 cents? So just having it there in cent as well. and then the price for 1,000 of them. So that when you come to actually doing this, the thinking, doing the figures is quite easy. It's the thinking around the figures, mathematical reasoning around the figures where all the work is, to be quite honest. And then, as Rona was saying, okay, I know what 200 costs. How would I find out what 1 costs? And while I've clicked a button there and that has come up, I think there could be a lot of conversation around that, how I'm going to work out the cost for 1 megabyte.
I have a suggestion that
Yes,
maybe this could be done in a kind of a prior assignment, so that it'd be separate altogether, so they'd be up to speed with this by the time they hit the assignment then.
that's a fantastic suggestion. So you as the tutor know what's coming down the line and you have all the prep done, and then when you get into here, you're going, you know, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees because there's so much to be done within it. But it's, Tony, if they're already prepared for this, then you're definitely on a winner, I would say. Now, some of them then would, so we're talking about unitary method there and a bit of prep around this and using the same context as well. So they'd say 1 cent. Now, they mightn't have to do the calculation here now because they'll notice that this is half as expensive as that one. And if they've done the calculation here, some of them might just say 10 euros straight away. Do you think that might happen?
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Yeah, and realizing that you don't have to do the calculations all the time. You know, nobody's forcing you to do it, and looking for patterns, spotting patterns, as long as there's logical thought behind it. That's so important. So they can, if they like, you know, multiply by 1,000. And then 10 megabytes costs, what does 1 megabyte cost? And now maybe some of them, as I think was a few Rona there answered a minute ago, would they see that that's in between the other two?
Well, at my level, I know they would. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then they might say 15. And of course, that's perfectly good reasoning. And the whole thing about this is that they have, when they get away from the actual maths in class type of thing, they have a lot of very good mathematical reasoning, and using it here just to give them confidence in, you know, I really am able to do this. And I don't all the time have to be relying on my calculator. Now,
And I think giving them nice round numbers like that, you know, 2, 1, 1.5 is also a good learning base for people who don't automatically recognize that. Showing the 20, the 10, the 15, as opposed to beside the 2 and the 1 and the 1.5. I think it's very clear and might awaken a bit of you know, knowledge in somebody that it's easier to do that than work it out mathematically.
yes, yeah, totally. And the, you know, the confidence that gives them that, and then maybe, you know, if you let them each them off doing it a little bit on their own and come back and say, well, how did I do it? How did you do it? How did someone else do it? Oh yeah, I didn't think of doing it that way. You know, that they learn from each other, that you're not just the person with all the information either. Now, some people might have done this differently as well. When you think about it, somebody might have jumped from the 200 to the 1,000 rather than getting the 1 unit. Would they see the connection between the 200 megabytes and 1,000 megabytes? Anybody like to unmute there? You know, by
if it was presented pictorially, like as I was saying in a bar chart or something like that, then they may see how many 200s were in 1,000.
So, and you could have another bar chart here as an aid.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. And they could see clearly from the scale. So
yes.
I think that whole idea of the bar charts, Tony, is going to be really helpful. you know, that it's 5 times. And then if you just multiply the 5 by 2 to get the €10. Some of them might do that, and the relationship between 10 and 1,000. And even, I think, Tony's previous suggestion, having met this maybe in another class where they're aware of the factor of scale there. So if, you know, 10 and 1,000, so 100 times that. It's just another way of doing it. There's so much actually in that one slide. Like you've got ratio and proportion, you've got you know, money, you've got comparisons, you've got looking for patterns, and I think with a lot of these slides as we go along, I'm certainly not talking about one class for this. I'm talking about a whole series of classes. So just to unmute for a minute there, and could people come back with their thoughts on what I've just said there?
Yeah, can I just say, I was part of a session on dyscalculia last week as part of another online training. It was something I was unfamiliar with, but the notion that, you know, we're looking at 2 and 1, and we know 1.5 is in between those two. If somebody's dealing with this particular scenario, the dyscalculia, they don't see that pattern or that link. So Tony's suggestion of the bar charts would be hugely important there.
Great, yeah. I think definitely, Tony, you have a fan base there for the bar charts.
Yes.
Anybody else like to add a comment? And I have to say, I'm not an expert by any means on dyscalculia, so Imelda, I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, no, look, I had never even heard of it until I attended a session last week, but I have to say it was fascinating. And for anyone who's involved in maths and sees students struggling with maths, it was an absolute eye-opener. It was little things like, you know, if you said to a student, we'll start in 10 minutes, we'll start the class in 10 minutes, that they had no concept of what 10 minutes was in relation to the time stretching ahead of them. And it was very small things, like you might have a student who's constantly running late, that isn't a lateness. It can be dyscalculia because they simply don't have this concept of time that perhaps other people have. It's fascinating even to have a brief read about it. It's very, very interesting.
Excuse me, do you have information about that program? I'd be very interested in it.
Tony, I can look back on where I was doing the training. Sorry, I'll just have a quick look here now and see if I can, because I've been trying to do a good bit of training at the moment, and that session was beyond fascinating. Now I have to say. Sorry,
how do you spell it?
So DYSCALCULIA. So think dyslexia. This is dyscalculia.
Yes, I get it now.
Yeah, I'm very interested also.
Hi, Pamela here. I think I have the information on that, so I'll share it in the chat there in a minute. I think I have a link to the presentation on that.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be looking at that. Thanks very much, Pamela, also.
Thanks for that.
And
I've just thought of something else. It's inspired me to think of it's more of a geography task. I can imagine my students would be thinking, right, on my route to my center every morning, or on my route home, or my normal trips around town or whatever, where can I get free Wi-Fi? And doing a map based on that. It might inspire something like that.
well, definitely, because a lot of them are getting by on a small number of minutes.
Myself included.
And you're racing to the next, and it can happen, you know, when you go on holidays and you go abroad and maybe you haven't checked your roaming or something.
Yeah, no, it's important to know where you can get free, for sure.
Absolutely. And you know, we're talking about numeracy and literacy. To me, that's a very, very important facet of it.
Well, it's incredibly savvy to know where you can get it for nothing, especially when you're looking at these type of prices. You know, it's mad, really.
Yeah. And even if the students never do the actual calculations here, you know, maybe step by step, I think engaging with the whole context and scenario and the discussion around it is so important for their day-to-day living.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
So anybody else got any comment there? That's really valuable. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just move on. We've nearly got there now, because
have we nearly bought a
No.
phone at this stage?
yeah. So we know kind of the cost now for 1 gigabyte. Okay, so there was quite an aside there working that out with units and everything else, and as Tony said, maybe that needs to be taken off on its own in the beginning. And you know, when we're doing multiplication, you know, the idea of multiplication is repeated addition, and always saying that to students, you know, what does 5 by 2 really mean? 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. So anyway, the cost of a gigabyte needed for a month, for 5 gigabyte, for Meteor, it's €20. So that's what we spent all the time working out there a few minutes ago, the cost for 1 gigabyte. So there's the cost for the 3 phone companies. Sorry, no pun on 3, but so which one is the most expensive? So obviously 3. And why is that? You know, if you look, you had to buy quite a lot from 3, didn't you? You had to buy 12 gigabytes from them. And they were charging €15 for 1 gigabyte. And you, in the original table, that doesn't stand out for you. I think maybe people were very quick working things out. So I know Meteor is the most expensive on the cost per gigabyte, but you only have to buy 5. So all of these things, the way the information is given to you is not necessarily to make you see all these things. So these are, you know, real life lessons. We have to sift through the information and see what the messages are. And numbers help us there.
And I think it's important for the students to realize that it is designed to be complicated. It is designed to confuse us as consumers, so that they're not left thinking, I can't work this out. None of us can work it out. It's designed that way. And that's even a really important lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, even if you can, the fact that you realize it's not because I'm not good at figures.
Yeah.
It's because it confuses all of us.
Yeah.
I think it's an idea for somebody creating an app. Somebody should create an app in order to map their way through this.
Yeah, there's definitely. Now, Comreg do something on comparing phones. I was looking at it yesterday, but I felt at the end of it, and it is very good, that going through this process step by step still gives an insight that I wouldn't have got by just going to the ready-made answer, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
And do you know, there are things in life that you only do once, maybe, and you say, okay, now I understand. And maybe this is one of them, but if they never do the detail of this calculation, do you think it would be useful on a once-off?
Yeah, the reason I suggested the app was that it's just like a confidence builder, you know.
Yes.
The student works through it bit by bit, but then he can go into the app and say, yeah, I got it right, or I got it wrong.
Yes.
Just for verification. No,
it's a great idea. And so there's maybe Tony, yourself?
Beyond my pay scale, I think.
Beyond my capabilities anyway, but maybe, you know somebody or somebody connected with NALA. It's a fantastic idea, and certainly would take a lot of the pain out of some of these decisions that we are, you know, you can see when you have to make this decision, I have to sift through all this information, and it's uncomfortable for everybody, not just students who are finding difficulty with numbers. So, sorry, I meant to, before I put that in, are we now finished? Do we know the cost of the data for the entire contract? And I think you have to remind them it's for the entire contract. And when I gave this to some adults, they, as I said to you, they tended to forget this. So when you, differences, okay, there's, these two are the same. There's 80 euro of a difference here, which is considerable, but multiply that by 24. And look at, you know, you're talking about nearly 2,000 euro. And that's the important thing, to when you multiply by something, suddenly small differences can become really big. So just be aware of that. So now, where's the best value for data? So we're going along, we're at the final frontier now, as we've nearly bought our phone, etc. And rounding and estimating, as always, there's the total cost of each contract. And they're just figures. It's the talk around them that's really important. So we started off saying Vodafone was cheapest. Then we said 3 was cheapest. And then, as Tony rightly predicted at the very beginning, Meteor turned out to be cheapest.
Tony's been here before.
So I gave this to a student, and not a student of maths, okay, and just and they were focused in immediately on their, you know, which one was closest to the needs of David, like you did, Tony, I think. Is that how you went about it?
Yes.
You were reasoning there. And whereas you know, I must say myself, I start thinking numbers, and sometimes it's a disadvantage to be thinking numbers. In context, it actually can be more useful. So look at the differences. You know, the most expensive is near 6,300 as opposed to 5,000, you know, 18 bones of 2,000 euro nearly of a difference over the long term. So there are lessons to be learned there. Now, if you manage to get through all this with your students, what do you think are the take-home messages from this? For you and for your students, I hope that you might use some of it. You don't have to use all of it. And I think it applies to a lot of situations where you get a lot of information, you know, whether it's car insurance, you know, health insurance, where you're given a lot of information for different companies. So in that sense, that it could be sort of a generic task. Anyway, can you unmute there, please, and maybe some feedback would be most welcome.
I think it would very much bring home the message that companies all selling the same, if similar products, whatever, design it so that a comparison between one and the other is very difficult. I mean, when you think of all the companies that we deal with, health insurance comes to mind straight away. It's designed to be incredibly difficult. And I think for students to realize it is not them, it is the company designing it to be difficult, so that if they can give you the flashiest offer, you might jump for that without doing the comparison.
Yes.
And to warn them that often the first 6 months it's a reasonable looking offer, but then after 6 months it goes up and you're tied into a 1 or 2 year contract.
So that's another thing to discuss with students. The one I had there, all the contracts were the same length. And when you go to compare them, you have a further difficulty, contract lengths. Right, Bridie, is that Bridie?
I think there might be just background noise
Okay.
on Bridie's
Okay.
mic. Anyone else want to make any comment or question or anything?
Funny enough, worse again, sometimes they include the price of the phone into the contract, which I thought you were doing there when you initially started with the price of the phone. I thought that was included in the contract. Sometimes when you take on a contract, they say the phone is free with the contract, so that's another issue you'll come across.
Exactly. I probably should have made that clearer. in the
No, but
context.
I came clear fairly quickly. But it's one of those issues with these
It
kind of
is.
bundle things, you know, really.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've only looked at a number of the issues around this. And so anyway, meter came out on top, and you know, I just have a very quick slide there. What are the students' own needs? Reading the information several times, breaking down into steps, using tables maybe, but at least labeling everything. What's varying, what's fixed? Compare like with like. You were talking about contracts there. The context. You know, when we're talking about numeracy, the context is the essential part. Remove any distractions, beware of initial low costs, maybe. Small differences become significant in the long term. The small print and other considerations, and you brought in some of them there, roaming within and outside the EU. If you go up to Northern Ireland, you know, to be aware of that. You're not in the EU anymore. And you may have unlimited data, but the fair usage policy, it may not be, is unlimited, really unlimited. So there's a big conversation apart from any calculations around this, which I think is useful for students really like. So at that point, Fergus, I think I would like to thank everybody. I found the contributions really invaluable. Thank you so much for engaging with this. I hope you get something out of it. Okay.
Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to Sheelagh. You went through everything at a really nice pace so that even I could understand it all and show the complications. And I hope I think, and I hope that you were able to explain to people how to break it down and use it with their learners if their learners are at a certain level. So I got the feeling there's something in there for everyone, and whatever level the learners are at. And it's so practical because everybody feels, you know, are they being done a little bit by the mobile phone company or their Netflix or whatever it is that they're getting, or someone said health insurance or whatever it is. So it's really, really practical. So thanks a million again. I can just see now from the chat that people are saying thanks very much. It was a wonderful resource. So thank you. So I'll send on Sheelagh's presentation to everybody and the recording of this for those who missed it or want to look through something again. So there's a lot of people saying thanks again. So Sheelagh, thanks a million, and thanks to everyone for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye now.
Right, thanks, Sheelagh. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.